Hey, holistic healers. Want to know if this podcast is for you? Let's find out. Blue Sage Holistic Healing is a health-based spiritual community emphasizing the use of Eastern and Western techniques to prevent and treat disease. We focus on the mind, body, spirit, the divine, and beyond as a means of self-healing and using the least invasive interventions necessary. Right. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Blue Sage Holistic Healing Podcast. I am Ashley Francis, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am also your host. And today I am joined by the lovely Katie Sutton. And Katie is an intuitive channel. She's a vibrational healer and way shower who supports you on your personal path to wholeness and fulfillment, which is manifested by living as your authentic self. Katie's clients span a broad demographic spectrum and are united in their search for solutions to highly sensitive empaths overwhelmed by feeling what everyone around them is feeling. Relatable. And successful corporate professionals in lucrative roles that leave from feeling empty, exhausted, and suffering from stress-induced illnesses such as hormonal imbalances, adrenal fatigue, migraines, addictive behavioral patterns, and chronic fatigue. After investing more than a decade in a combination of research into natural remedies to her personal health concerns, formal study in undergraduate and graduate programs at the Boulder Psychic Institute, and certifications in professional and wellness coaching, Katie founded Zen Within Academy. She and her husband, Josh, travel across the country leading retreats and workshops where they incorporate her original and transformational 12-dimensional healing techniques and sound healing therapies, which create tangible and lasting shifts for their clients. Zen Within Academy also facilitates invaluable access to a community of like-minded individuals who understand each other's struggles and encourage one another in their healing and spiritual transformation. Thank you so much for being here.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but that is so well written, and it also is really good. Like, she just made my job so much easier. That's nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
So let's just start with your background, and we talked a little bit about it, but what more can you add to that?
Yeah. So I always like to talk about kind of how I got here and a little bit about my childhood and the winding path, because I feel like a lot of people can relate to that story, because a lot of people are in transition and moving more towards their passion, especially after the last 2 years and everything with the pandemic. So I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina area in the mountains. And I'm an only child, grew up on the side of a mountain, mostly with animals. And so as an empath, that was a great environment for me. And at the same time, had this really distinct desire to be a CEO of a technology company when I grew up.
Those two things don't normally go together.
I know, they don't really go together, do they? And so I've always had this very passionate, driven personality, very type A, very wanting to move things forward and make things happen. And but I'm also an empath and have always been an empath, and only in the last probably 12 years realized how deeply empathic I am. And so I went into studying management information systems, went into working in the financial services sector and technology, ran huge programs, billions of dollars of money managed, all kinds of things happening, and got really sick a year in. It started with shingles at 22, which is very painful. Then it quickly moved into chronic fatigue, adrenal burnout, migraines. And then about 2 years into my corporate career, so I was probably 24, 25, I was at lunch with some of my colleagues, and it was a really stressful time. I was managing a whole bunch of projects at 25 years old, and like just got thrown really into the deep end because I'm an overachiever, and reached up at lunch, and I realized that my thyroid was swollen. I didn't realize that's what it was at the time, but I had what's called a goiter, which is where your thyroid gets like 10 times bigger and actually swells up in size. And I'd been having a lot of symptoms, and I just assumed it was just stress. and went to the doctor, got really freaked out, thought I had cancer, all of that whole process, and then arrived at the understanding that I had Graves' disease, which is when your thyroid becomes hyperactive. And that was what a lot of my symptoms were related to. And so I tried the traditional medical path, but was really unable to get answers. And everything that they gave me, my body reacted to. I literally broke out into hives and everything that they gave me. And so my now husband, who was my fiance at the time, said to me, "Hey, Katie, maybe you need to go back to some of the things that you started with when you were a child." Because when I was little, my mom would take me to yoga and meditation, and we would go to herb making classes and like all these different things I was exposed to because she was very into, everything that I do now, actually. Yeah. And I had done meditation and yoga off and on through college and, through high school, and it had kind of fallen away. And so I went back to a meditation class, and I think it was like at a gym, and it was probably not very good, but it was enough to like get me started, and started to find my way back to myself, and ended up on an acupuncturist table. And as soon as he put the needles in me, I felt like somebody let all of the air out of my balloon because it was overinflated and I was super stressed. And so that kind of gave my body something to shift out of the symptoms. But then I quickly realized that the environment that I was in, I was constantly filtering what I needed to say and not being my truth or my true self in the corporate space, because there was so much conflict, and all I wanted to do was make everybody happy. And I would just be like a sponge, and I would suck in all of their stress into my body. And that's really what happened. Yeah. And that's why I got sick. And so a few years later, we ended up in Boulder, Colorado, and we were there. And if you've never been to Boulder, it's like a love bubble. It's an amazing place. I love it. And again, my husband was like, "Hey, there's this healing happening at this place called the Boulder Psychic Institute downtown. We don't have anything to do tonight. Do you want to go?" He's always nudging me in these little ways, even though he doesn't know. Yeah. And so we went, and at the time we had been horseback riding and fly fishing and doing all these like outdoor things. My low back was killing me. And I had chronic pain throughout this whole scenario. So even once the thyroid stuff came into balance, I was still taking like 6 or 7 ibuprofen a day because I was in chronic pain. Yeah. And I sat down in this chair for this 15-minute healing, and there's like 25 people in this room, and these healers are working on all people, right? Like one per person. And she looks at me and she starts working on me, and I immediately felt it. And
what did you feel?
I felt something shifting in my body, like my whole body started tingling, and I felt the pressure that was in my back beginning to release. And it almost felt like, if you've ever played that game as a kid when they crack an egg on your head and pretend and you feel it, right? It was kind of like that, like just leaving my body. Yeah. And she looked at me and she said, "Katie, you are holding on to so much of your mom's energy in your low back. She's corded into you. You're carrying her stress. You've been doing it since birth. And that's what's happening with your low back." And she cleared it, and my back was better for 3 months.
What's really good about that is when I hear things like that, it immediately takes so much shame out of that feeling, right? Like I was born with a portion of this.
Yeah. And I tell people that all the time when I'm working with them. Like, a lot of this stuff happens as soon as we incarnate, right? And it's a pattern, and the universe and the world and everybody around us is trying to get us to wake up to that. And sometimes we project that onto other people. Amen. Right? And so she helped me, and then I started taking classes with them online. I studied with them for 2.5, 3 years, went through their undergrad and graduate programs, and basically learned how to take this very sensitive feeling body that I have and use it as a tool to help other people. Yeah. And so I started working with clients through my practicum through them on the weekends. And around that same time that I was really starting that, my husband and I started doing sound healing, very, very happenstance. And it allowed us to basically put ourselves out into the world and be at the yoga studios in different places where we were doing sound healing. We started with like a didgeridoo and a singing bowl. Now we play like 45 different instruments.
Yeah. And it's really cool, guys. It's really cool.
And so that kind of allowed me to like start teaching a little bit, because I would kind of just put a few things in that I was learning into every sound journey, and I would just kind of pepper it in. And then shortly after that, around 2017, I got laid off, and the universe gave me a huge favor, because a week before I had basically hired a business coach to help me build out what is now Zen Within Academy.
Woo-hoo.
And I was like, okay, I've got this 2-year plan. I've got it all set, type A personality. And then the universe was like, no, she's ready. She hired a business coach. She's laid off. And it was right before Labor Day. And every year at Labor Day, we go to a yoga festival. It's like one of our happy places on this planet in Floyd, Virginia. And I got laid off.
Is it Floyd Fest?
Yeah, no, it's Floyd Yoga Jam, actually.
Oh, okay.
Very similar. Yeah. And I got laid off, and then we left the next day and packed up the RV that we rented. I got out of the RV the first day that we were there, unpacking it, stepped in a hole and twisted my ankle. So I spent that whole first weekend after I got laid off at a yoga festival, unable to move.
Of course.
And my leg was propped up. And I remember sitting there listening to the music and doing all the things and watching people do yoga and just bawling my eyes out. But it was what I needed. Like the universe was like, no, you're going to feel all of this. Right. And so that's how everything got started. And Zen Within Academy, I founded that. I started seeing one-on-one clients and running group programs to help people be empowered in their empathy like me. And now we do retreats, and we have the Soul Expo. We have all kinds of things happening now.
Beautiful.
So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I wanted to go back to your studies, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are wondering, wow, you can actually study this stuff. Like there's legit higher learning, probably well-vetted types of programs out there. So can you talk a little bit about what was the name of it and what did it entail?
Yeah. So there's several psychic institutes that are well established, that have been around for a long time. Delphi in Georgia is one, Berkeley Psychic Institute, Boulder Psychic Institute. They both happen to have BPI as their acronym. But I mean, everything that they teach is basically like the nuts and bolts of how to become a psychic healer. And so for me, within Zen Within Academy, I wanted to found something kind of like that, but with a little bit of a different intention. Because when you hear the word psychic, it gets put in a very distinct box.
Right.
And what I realized is being psychic or intuitive is really just there to help us navigate day to day and be more in tune with our feminine energies. And so I have a lot of programs within Zen Within Academy as well to help people learn how to deal with their empathy and work with their empathy. And you can go on to become a 12th dimensional healer, which is the modality that I've downloaded through my body that I share with my clients, but you don't have to.
Right.
You can just come and you can learn about how to set boundaries energetically, because a lot of people don't realize, and probably the most empowering statement that I ever heard when I was in my psychic studies was that I think I was maybe a month and a half in, and my teacher we're on the phone, it's all online, and she says to me, Katie, 90% of what you're feeling isn't yours. And it was like somebody had like, the God feels, like where your whole body vibrates and the lights come on.
Feeling it now. Yes.
And it was a realization of like, oh my God, like
90%.
all this pain and all this suffering that I thought was mine, and I couldn't figure out why I was unhappy and why I was in pain and why my body was ill and all of these things. 90% of it wasn't mine.
Okay. Where does that come from? I'm just like, I stopped listening because I'm so focused on this 90%. Like, where does that's such a high percentage.
It is a high percentage, right? And I have tested this over the years with my clients and all of my students. I've probably put hundreds of students through my programs, and everybody that's attracted to my work is a deeply feeling empath.
Duh. Yeah.
And if I'm really being honest, the level of empathy on this planet has reached an all-time high because of everything that's happened in the last 2 years. Now, it may not be obvious that that's what's happening, because we're feeling so much, and everybody calls it anxiety. And I want to talk about anxiety in particular in just a moment.
Love it.
But everybody calls it anxiety or depression. They put all these labels on it, which are so important too, right? I don't want to discount that. but it's all energy as
Mhm.
well,
Mhm.
right? And so I've worked with a lot of people who have been in therapy and counseling for a long time, and they know themselves. They're emotionally intelligent. They understand where their bodies are buried, so to speak, and where their traumas are, but energetically they can't seem to shift out
Shift.
of it.
Shift. That's
Right.
such a good word for it.
Yeah, and it's not that they haven't been trying, right? And that's the real frustrating part sometimes. And so I approach it from kind of this more feminine perspective of, okay, well, what is this feeling trying to teach you? What is this relationship that you're really struggling with, trying to mirror back to you? What is it that is maybe hiding in the subconscious of your energy field that you're running as a trauma or a story that says, I have to feel everybody's pain?
Right.
Right. And so when we can arrive at those conclusions, we can begin to decouple ourselves from some of those patterns energetically. And the transformation can be really quick. It can be like night and day from one day to the next
Yeah.
when there's a realization.
Yeah.
Because the mental body wants to understand why something is happening. And so if I can help dissect that by looking at somebody's energy field and giving them an energy reading and just really tune into their subconscious that they're not able to see,
Right.
then that realization comes in and then they're empowered.
Yeah.
Right. Because being an empath is awesome.
Yeah, it is.
You can walk into a room as an empath, and if you're feeling really good, if you're really in your empowered empathy, you walk into that room and you can shift the entire vibration of the room because everybody will feel you.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're empowered in that, that's a beautiful thing. But if you're not, and you walk into a room and there's 10 people out of 20 that are depressed or anxious or fearful, you're going to immediately feel that. And most people feel that and assume that it's theirs.
Right.
They never ask the question, hey, I'm really uncomfortable in this situation or this conversation, this person that I just met. I wasn't uncomfortable 5 minutes ago. Why am I so uncomfortable now?
Right.
And that's not to say that we blame everybody outside of ourselves, right? It's just saying you're an empath, you can feel what's happening for them. And then if you can acknowledge that in some way,
right,
whether that's internally or even I tell people, acknowledge it in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I just got super uncomfortable. Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that may seem really forward for some people, especially if you've just met someone. But when you're in vulnerability like that and you're just being honest about what's happening for you, that's how you form these beautiful, authentic relationships with people.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
We're so conditioned to self-blame.
Yeah.
Right. That if I'm feeling an emotion, it must be me.
Yeah.
You know, what did I do to fuck up? What did I do to take this on?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's such a good point that it can be a matter of training and just tuning in and tapping into the other stuff to acknowledge that, hey, it's not all you.
Yeah.
90% of it isn't.
90% of it isn't. And that 10% that is very impactful, right? Because that 10% that is yours, let's say you have a big abandonment wound, because I work with people on that all the time. And so every time you get in relationship or friendship, that abandonment wound gets triggered when somebody tries to give you feedback about something that's happening in that relationship, and you keep dipping out of those relationships, you never heal that wound.
Right.
But if you realize that you have that abandonment wound and you understand the energetics of how that's working, you get in relationship with somebody and they give you feedback on something, and you can take that as an opportunity to say, wow, I wonder where this wound that they just triggered is coming from.
Good question.
Right. And so I work with a lot of people, a lot of times with people on self-inquiry and really being able to kind of neutrally observe our behaviors. And from an energetic standpoint, if we layer that on and I can help them to start to see what's happening in their energy field or feel what's happening in their energy field, then they can really notice those triggers. And there's one thing that when people start in program with me, I always teach them almost within, I think it's like the second class that we go through, of when you're in relationship with somebody and you get triggered, there's an energetic pathway to clear that energy in the moment so that you can come back to presence and you don't react.
Right.
Because all we need is that like 5-second pause so that we don't go into abandonment, so that we don't go into anger or frustration or whatever our usual, mode of operation is.
Yeah.
And if we can clear that energy, then every person that we meet that triggers us is a healer.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
We forget that, like you said, I love the way you said that it typically is a few seconds, milliseconds, even, but being able to tune into the point that it is a choice and you get to navigate that.
You do. And so a lot of places will teach you that you have to do it their way. And, even when I went through BPI, it was an amazing program, but it was a little too black and white for me.
Because it's academic. It's still academic.
And so when I created Zen Within Academy, I was like, I want to put Academy in the title, but I want to really empower people to take these teachings and make them their own. So even if I give somebody like a guided visualization and the tool that I give them doesn't really work for them, I'm like, okay, great. Take the essence of that tool and make it your own so that you can feel empowered in this, because I want to teach people how to fish. I don't want to fish for them. There's not enough of me to go around.
Amen, girl. Amen.
And that's the biggest mistake that I think I've personally made in the past before I started all this training, when I was trying to do healing work and didn't know that's what was happening, is I was taking on everybody's stuff and giving them advice and doing all these things because I've always been intuitive. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to help, but I didn't realize that doing that for them and taking responsibility for their process is not actually helping them.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's not helping you either.
No. And that's so much of the energy that I see us clearing on the planet right now. Everything that's happening, regardless of when you guys watch this, there will be some level of conflict happening on this planet. Mm-hmm. And, it's important to understand that a lot of that conflict has been internalized, right? So a lot of what I'm working with clients on right now is this idea that these kind of toxic masculine traits that we always talk about. And I almost hate to use that word because it really vilifies the masculine. And so no, when I say masculine, I'm not talking about gender. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about an energy. Right. Right. Like a go energy, a do energy, mm-hmm. right? Whereas the feminine is more of a be and allow energy, a receptive energy. And so we've got all of this kind of toxic masculine energy that we've been in for 13,000 years, which I could go down a whole rabbit hole about that. But it's been a choice that we've made as a collective to be in this energy, to learn some things.
Why?
Well,
why have we chosen that path?
Why have we chosen that path? Well, if I was to give you a cosmic history lesson, as we've come to Earth as a collective, and when I work with my guides, what I am told is that we came here to learn how to be in duality and to move from duality to unity, not by somebody coming to save us or coming in as unified beings. We came in as dualistic beings, feeling separate from source, feeling separate from each other. And we came in to learn and to see and kind of experiment. Can we go from that place of duality back to unity through our own lived experience?
So all of this is an experiment.
All of it is an experiment. And it really helps to look at it that way. Mm-hmm. And so we're in all of this conflict, right? And we've internalized that conflict in some way in our own internal masculine and feminine. So my feminine aspects are my intuitive body and my energetic body. That's the feminine part of us, mm-hmm. okay? And our emotions. Mm-hmm. The masculine aspects are our physical body and our mind. Okay, very masculine energy.
Right.
But when we have a lot of externalized conflict happening, let's say you grew up in a household where mom and dad didn't get along, mm-hmm. right? Or maybe you had a sibling that you were in argument with all the time and there was a lot of conflict. Oftentimes you go one of two ways. Either you make yourself bigger and you pretend like nothing bothers you. That's where we get a little bit of narcissistic tendency coming in. Or if you're an empath, you drop into feeling everything and taking it personally, going into shame, taking that into your body, making yourself smaller.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so when we have that, we start to internalize one way or the other that there's something wrong with us, or we internalize that toxic masculinity in that the feminine parts of us, the feeling parts of us, which we all have, we're all intuitive. We all can feel, even if we don't think we can. Mm-hmm. We start to internalize these external programs that say, well, you have to do more. You have to be successful. You have to go faster. You have to do this.
Do.
Right? We internalize that. And then the message that gets sent to our feminine is that you're not okay. Mm-hmm. You're not
enough.
You're not enough. You're unworthy. And that feminine parts of us begins to shut down and shut down and shut down. And then we're kind of all walking around disconnected from our feelings. And then we can't connect with one another. And then we can't be in unity.
Yeah.
Right. And so this path to wholeness that we're all on in this grand experiment, we're going to need to go through the emotional body to get there. We have to heal that. And my belief about the last 2 years, without getting into all of the details of that, is that it was here to wake us up to that. It was here to kind of bring in a collective trauma that we would all experience so that we would stop pretending that we're not traumatized beings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It kind of leveled the playing field. And I see, I've got a lot of clients in the corporate space. I have law clients who are lawyers. I have doctors, and they're coming to me and they're saying, Katie, I'm not fulfilled in what I'm doing. I don't think I'm making a difference. There's something missing.
Right.
And I always start with, okay, well, what's missing inside of you, right? You want to make a change in your life. You want to get divorced. You want to have a new relationship. You want to do something new. What needs to shift inside of you so that that external environment can shift?
Right.
Right. And so it's a big part of, I think, this transition that we're in right now. And we have to do it through the emotional body. I've tried to do it every other way.
Yeah.
I'm a thinker,
Yeah.
right? I like to connect all the dots. I'm type A, all of these things that you would say, oh, that you can't be intuitive and be all of that. You can't be a healer and be all of that. I surprise people all the time when they get to know me and they're like, oh, you have all these other aspects to your personality, right? I'm not just a healer and a teacher. There's a lot to me. And it's important that all of those things are seen, right? That I bring all of those things to the table. But if those parts have been shamed in any way or over amplified in any way, then that has to come into balance so that I can move forward.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long answer to your question.
Great answer. Great answer. And I'm wondering about, it seems like we are more imbalanced as a culture, as a collective, to be more masculine based right now.
Yeah.
Wondering, so my knowledge is that we're about 6,000 years old and you're saying 13,000.
Yeah.
So going back from just the span of everything, have we always been that way? Have we always been geared towards masculine? Why now? What's happening now to be geared towards masculine?
So I'm going to go a little woo on you for some of your listeners, perhaps. But if you go back and you study the history that nobody talks about, and you look at things that we think are fantasy, like Atlantis and Lemuria, for example, that people have heard of and they're like, oh, it's fake and, it's not real. We have a lot longer history. And actually, it's starting to be proven in science that we have a lot longer history, and that some of the native tribes that we thought were concentrated in these areas actually were in a lot of different places. And if you look at those cultures, right, where we were more tribal in nature, more native in nature, what happens is in those cultures, there's a real reverence for the land and there's a reverence for the community, right? And that's a more matriarchal or feminine energy to be in.
Okay.
And then we started making technological advances. We started moving things forward. We started creating technology and steam engines and all these wonderful things that we have created on this planet that have made, in some aspects, our lives so much easier.
Right.
Right. And so we shifted from that more feminine, earth-based model, tribal connected community model, to a more masculine, separate model. There's a lot of reasons for that. Religion is one, which can be triggering for some people. So I try not to go too deep down that rabbit hole.
Sure.
But religion isn't bad, right? These are choices that if I zoom out and I don't make anybody the villain, we've made as a collective, because it is an experiment. We came here to move from duality to unity. So it makes sense that we would start out as feminine. We would move really into the masculine, and we happened to get a little stuck for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know that maybe we intended to be in this masculine energy for quite so long. We've gotten a little bit stuck here.
Interesting.
Right. But we've learned a lot. And now what I'm witnessing on the planet, and this has really been happening since 2012, which is about the time that I started to wake up, right? Which is about the time that a lot of us that have been on this path for a while started to wake up. Things started to shift. When that came in, we kind of shift the pendulum more towards bringing the feminine back.
Okay.
But here's the thing, and a lot of people talk about the feminine and talk about divine feminine energy in the spiritual circles, but they're failing to realize that we're not going back to where we started.
Right.
Where something brand new is coming in. That's what I call the new earth. Okay. And this brand new energy that's coming in is where these two energies have come into sacred union together in balance. And nobody knows what that's going to look like exactly. A lot of us think that we know, and I can tell you from personal experience, as I've been doing this work on my masculine and feminine energy really distinctly for 2 years, it's become almost like the foundation of everything that I teach. It comes into everything. Every time I try to get away from it, it comes back.
Wonder why that is.
It's part of what I came here to do.
Yeah.
And so as I've been working with this in my own body, even just within the last 2 months, there's been a huge shift of, oh, I actually kind of know what being in my healed masculine feels like. I can get some stuff done, and I can be focused, and I can complete things without having to be stressed about it.
Right.
And when I'm in my healed feminine, I can feel my feelings and process them and move through them and then come back into balance.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've kind of been ping-ponging between the two. And that's why some people, I think, have been on such an emotional roller coaster, highs and lows. Right. That's us ping-ponging between these frequencies. Yeah. And so now we're getting to the place, and this kind of happened after the 2/22/22 portal that we just had in February.
Oh, yeah.
All those numbers coming together.
Yeah.
Synchronistic. There's a new balance coming in. And how I'm seeing that show up, because I always like to bring it from the woo to the practical, right? Is that people are more and more like getting really distinct with what they can have in their life and what they can't.
Yeah.
And so like for my clients, even if they're, really 3D thinkers, like I used to be, they come in and they're like, all of a sudden, I just don't want to be a doctor anymore. Right? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm kind of scared, but I just don't want to do this anymore. And so what's happening is they're tapping into that feminine that's been squashed, that they're realizing there's a feeling that has been unprocessed. Now they have to do that work to process that before the next thing comes in, which will hopefully be more about them being in balance and being aligned with their passion. And that's how I see us changing, right? The great resignation, the great awakening, whatever you want to call it, that's happening where everybody's leaving their jobs, right? And changing jobs and leaving husbands and wives. And there's a lot of change.
A lot,
right?
A lot.
It's because people are waking up to what's important. And what an amazing gift the last 2 years has been. That's how I try to look at it. I know it wasn't easy, right? I know there's been a lot of loss and a lot of grief, but what an amazing gift that this has come in to shake up our worldview to the point that we are actually really reevaluating our priorities and our values.
Yeah. And the way that I look at it is it's a way of space being made that we've, and yes, it is unfortunate that loss and grief, it is very sad and is very real. Yeah. I'm sensitive to that and also necessary. Yeah. We've got to lose to gain. Yeah. And that's kind of how I've been conceptualizing the past 2 years is we're creating space for something new.
Such a beautiful way to look at it. I always tell people that if you want the next thing to come in, the next relationship, the next job, the next way of being, you have to make space for it. Yeah. And
it's probably going to hurt.
Yeah, it will.
It's going to be some pain.
And, when I work with people and they come to me and they're like, Katie, I want X. And I'm like, great. And then I start to work within their field and help them see some things. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not in alignment with that because you're attached to all of these things over here that you've created that you think make you safe. And let's start looking at why your safety is coming from that external. And maybe there's something that happened in your childhood where you weren't nurtured. And at your root chakra, which is where all that comes from, you have this fear that everybody's going to abandon you or leave you, or you're going to be malnourished, or you're going to be in scarcity. Yeah. Right. It can come from so many different places.
And that stuff is very real.
Very real. Yeah. Very real. And a lot of times I'll point it out and be like, oh yeah, my mom, I couldn't even take her milk because I had an allergy. Like there's some thing that happened. Right. And so when we get into that awareness, then we can start to say, okay, I'm attached to these things that I think make me safe. What if these things are actually making me miserable? Yeah. Right. And am I willing to let go of it? And every single time the universe asks me if I'm ready to go to the next level, because I change a lot. I move fast, really fast, almost like it gives people around me whiplash sometimes. Because that's just who I am. And I want to move through all these things and learn all these things and do all these wonderful things.
And when you say change, do you mean like you're releasing?
I mean releasing. I mean the way that I work changes, what I'm teaching changes, what I'm doing changes. And every time that happens, the universe goes, okay, Katie, we see that you want to write this chapter in this book project, or we see that you want to create this giant expo or something that I want to do. And my guides will say to me in meditation, but that means that you have to be willing to let go of everything that you have now.
Everything.
Always say it that way. And there's this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I have to let go of everything.
Yeah.
But they pose that question to me in that way, right? Because my higher self was really speaking to me in that moment, saying, you have to be unattached. Right. And every single time there is something that gets lost. And I, for whatever reason, for me in this lifetime, that's often there's somebody in my life that spirals out. Not in a necessarily huge conflict way, but it's like their path changes and my path changes. And so I have grieved so many times. Every single time somebody leaves my life, even if it's a client that spirals out, there's grief.
Yeah.
Right? And so I have to make space.
Yeah.
But every single time my guides ask me that, I immediately go, no. Right. And I kind of shut down. And then what happens is for the next week or 2 weeks, I feel really uncomfortable. I start feeling like I have anxiety. My heart is closed. I can't sleep. I feel really dense and heavy in my body. I don't feel good. And I realize that's my resistance.
Yeah.
And then I go back into meditation and they ask me again.
You ready now? How about now?
How about now? And even though I'm still scared shitless, I say yes.
Yeah.
And if I could impart anything to the people that are listening to you, that's it. Because I think that people look at me sometimes and all these things that I'm doing, and they assume that it's all rainbows, right? Roses and rainbows. But the amount of grief that I have processed along this path has been monumental.
Yeah.
Put you in the bed catatonic for 4 hours at a time, monumental.
Yeah.
Right. But here's what grief does. And this is coming back to your comment about opening space. When I experience grief in somebody's field, this beautiful soft energy comes in that I call the Divine Mother, which is kind of our Divine Mother frequency that we carry on this planet. And it just looks to hold that person who is experiencing this grief, which is a heart opening for them. When we experience grief, if we're allowing the process and not in resistance to it, it does something in our field that just breaks open so many boundaries and so many barriers and so many traumas that we've used as protection in our heart. And we come to this point of surrender. You just can't with life in that moment. And in that moment, when all of that falls apart and all of that breaks open, that's when the light comes in.
Yes.
And that's when you start to find some part of you that you didn't know you had.
Yeah.
And so all of this grief that we've been through in the last couple of years, even not just losing loved ones, because that is such a huge part of what's happened, because so many people have decided to leave the planet at this time.
Right.
It's also grieving, I'm not going to concerts anymore. I had to let go of my aerial yoga class that I used to teach. That was my outlet for teaching.
And that's grief worthy.
It is.
Some people feel shame. People have, such bigger losses than I do. No, that counts.
It does count. And if you can lean into understanding that is grief, you can use that to create the space that you were talking about to make the opening for the new thing to come in.
Yeah.
But it's scary.
It's so scary.
And
so scary.
And when I work with people with anxiety, because I said I wanted to talk about that, I look at that as an energy flow problem. So yes, it does a lot of things when that energy flow is broken. It makes us go into fear in our mental body. It makes us socially anxious, all these different things that anxiety creates for us in our external environment. But when I look at the energetics of that, what's really happening is that we should be an open, clear channel from the crown of our head all the way through the soles of our feet. We came here to be vessels for the divine. Everybody is a channel like I am. And how you channel that might be writing or art or what you do for a living or being a mother, doesn't matter. When there is something that we're holding at our heart, whether it's grief or fear or lack or trauma, it begins to break down that flow. And when that flow is broken down, we begin to receive information and energy from the universe, as we are doing every single day, because we're living, breathing beings. And it bumps into that blockage that's at our heart space. And our body interprets that as anxiety, because that's what we've labeled it, right? And then all the other things get out of balance. So oftentimes when people come to me and they're like, I'm so anxious and I don't know where this has come from, I go into their heart chakra and say, okay, this is the grief that you're not feeling. This is the sadness that you're not feeling. This is the fear and the anger, all of the feelings that you're not feeling. And then when we get them into that emotional release place, which sometimes happens very quickly on my couch, then there's this energetic release that happens at their heart, and all of that light that's been waiting to come in, that's been trying to help them, floods through their body.
Beautiful.
And then they can start the process of keeping that heart open, which is a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you go out into the world heart open, sometimes really raw and vulnerable, and somebody stomps on it. Right? And so it is a practice, I think, for us to all work to keep our heart open. And it's hard as hell.
Yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah.
I was really great at hiding things and keeping everything compartmentalized and protecting myself, because as a deeply feeling empath, I didn't know that she was that. It was a protection mechanism.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
And so it's a learning process. And I think that's what we're all learning. And that's why we have so much conflict right now, because people are triggered as shit all the time. Right? And they're walking around as giant trauma triggers for each other. And instead of leaning into that and being honest about what somebody's triggering for us, and giving them the benefit of the doubt that if we're honest, that they're going to be able to hear us, we shut down again.
Right.
And then we're in relationship with people and it's very surface level, and we don't feel fulfilled and we don't feel connected.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so inspiring me, because I feel like I'm getting pinged with anxiety, in the mental health realm, and depression. And I'm not very popular in my community because I don't like diagnosing.
Yeah.
I don't like it, because at the moment that we do that, now you become the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And even for me, it's really hard for me to separate you from that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
there,
the label.
You got it. Yeah. And then I become more fixated on your symptoms and trying to alleviate symptoms.
Right.
But really, from an energetic and spiritual perspective, what I've begun to really learn and appreciate is that, one, that's so diminishing, and how patronizing, insulting, how insulting that is to your pure energy. And how dare I do that to you? Right. So I'd rather work with, how do we restore the balance, and to make meaning of why the anxiety or depression or so forth and so forth, why are those symptoms there? And really to, like, for example, depression, to conceptualize that as there's a meaning to that. There's a reason for it. And an energy.
Yeah.
Right. So stop fixating on this being so personal, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. That if you believe and subscribe to the fact that everything happens for a reason, wholeheartedly do, then there's a reason you're going through this.
Right.
And it's a matter of, using someone like you to clear the energies, to be a more receptive source for being able to move through that, and to receive the message of what is the meaning of all this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I try in my sessions, I am not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I never have claimed to be that. But to also have a portion in my sessions where there is a discussion, right? So I open the energies, ground the space, do a scan of the person's field, bring through any messages that I'm given, and then we have a conversation. And we talk about whatever's stuck, whatever's not moving in their life. And I always say I'm like Nancy Drew. I don't know if you ever read those theories.
Oh, yeah.
When you were a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Myself a little bit. And I say that I'm that because I will put the puzzle pieces together to try to figure out what is the root cause thing that is creating this external experience that you're having where you feel stuck or unable to move forward, or whatever the story is. And there's always an emotional component to that. There's always a physical component to that, of where it's stored in the body.
Yeah.
There's an energetic component to that. And then there's an intellectual component to that, a story. And so when I'm working with somebody, I try to look at them as a holistic being. There's 4 parts to them, and then there's an inner child. There's all these parts, right? And so which part is out of balance? Which part is stuck in the story? Which part needs to be loved? Which part needs a little kick in the ass? Right?
Sure.
Because
sure.
there's so much to us. And then when we put all those puzzle pieces together, what happens at the end of the session is that there's an activation that comes in, or some process or something that happens for that person where I'm able to go into their field and help them to release that energy, or more importantly, oftentimes bring something in,
Yes.
or bring something back.
Yes. Yeah.
Because every time we go through a trauma, there's a little bit of our light that gets left behind.
Right.
Right. In that experience. And so sometimes I'll do timeline work with people and go back into that timeline and say, okay, at 6 years old, this teacher said this thing to you, and to everybody else, it might not have been a big deal, but for you, you're still talking about it.
Right. Right.
So let's clear that energy and let's rebuild that inner child's light and bring her back, and I also hope, and this is my hope, for myself and for everybody, that we can reclaim our joy and our play and our inner child on this planet, because we're so fucking serious. Sorry, I do curse.
Feel free. Feel free.
So we're so serious on this planet, and our inner child is our light, and it's also our pure connection to source and our intuition.
Girl, preach. Yes.
And so when that inner child is here, right, they are able to connect us to source. And if you're around children and they're talking about fairies and unicorns and dragons and angels and all these things, like, that's real.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we as adults tell them that it's not, and that may be big for some of your listeners to like even think about, right? It may expand their horizon a little bit to think about that stuff as being real. It's just not in our physical 3D reality yet at this point. It used to be a long time ago. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But we need to remember, especially with our children, I think, to help cultivate that. And I'm so impressed by the parents that come to me that are like, I want to heal so that my kid doesn't have to have these things that I have.
Amen. Yes.
And so, helping parents and showing them the way to be conscious in that is another passion of mine, because I feel like, they're the next generation.
Yeah.
And every time a parent comes to me and says, my child is behaving badly, or this is going wrong and I don't know how to fix it. This can be triggering for people. It's all the parent, right? Not saying that the child isn't having that behavior, but they are the mirror of our own inner child. And so let's say that the kid is acting out at school and restless. Okay, what is happening in this parent's inner child landscape where they want to act out and they want to be restless at what they're experiencing? Maybe they're unhappy at work.
Right.
And so if I work with a parent, they'll call me the next day and they'll be like, my child isn't behaving that way anymore. What happened? I'm like, they don't need to mirror that for you anymore.
Right. And to add to that, because I think you're right, that can be triggering to hear.
Yeah.
But the way that I like to conceptualize that too is that if you think about a child, they are pure consciousness.
Yes.
They are moving in and out. They're not attached to shit, So that makes sense that it is a tie to being a reflection of you, because you're the one with more ego development. Right. The child is consciousness.
Yeah. And, I believe that we all have soul contracts when we come here. Yeah. The way I like to describe it is that before we come to Earth, we get off at a bus stop, a cosmic bus stop, and we get off at that bus stop, and everybody that's going to be important to us in our life, and maybe even mildly important to us in our life, is there as a soul. And we have this list, this clipboard. This is how I like to imagine it. And we go down this list on our clipboard of all the things that we want to learn in this lifetime. And then we stop at each item and we say, okay, who's going to be willing to break my heart so badly that I don't think I can put it back together? And somebody in that crowd of people raises their hand and says, I will do that. And I explain it that way because oftentimes we go into this conflict place of I'm the victim and they're the villain. And that's not to say that we shouldn't set boundaries, because I'm all about boundaries and releasing people from our lives when it's not in alignment. But we can also do that with love and compassion, right? And forgiveness, because that person raised their hand, in my belief, and said, yeah, I'll come in and I'll be the narcissist and I'll stomp on your heart and I'll tell you that you suck and I'll break all of these things. And then you're going to, through that, learn so much about yourself and put yourself back together. And I'll be the one that will be willing to be villainized in your story.
Yeah.
And if you think about it from that perspective, like, man, to sign up to be that in somebody's life, like
Mhm.
you have to be a pretty strong soul.
Yeah.
And that's why when I always talk about empathy and narcissism, I always say they're two sides of the same coin. And, the narcissist has the same wounds and the same shame as the empath. They just choose to externalize them in the way that they take up all the air in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
And
really
make
good way
it
to
all
say it.
about them. And
That's
the
right.
empath is like, okay, I don't want to take up any space because I can feel everybody's pain and I'm going to pull it all into my body and I'm going to try to make it better. And they still make it about them.
Right.
They drop into the victim space and the martyr space and make it about them. And party of one here, I did that for years, right? So there's like no judgment in that statement.
No.
But that's the energetics of what happens. And it can be so confusing when you get in that dynamic. That's a whole other podcast. Because we want to blame, we want to externalize, and so it always has to be balanced. And so as I say, it always comes back to masculine and feminine. Our masculine wants to protect and defend and go to war sometimes, and our wounded feminine, when she's in that place, wants to be in the victim role, right? But if we're in our healed state in both of those, then the feminine says, man, this sucks, I'm feeling all these feelings and I'm going to be honest about these feelings. And then the masculine comes in and says, okay, she's got all these feelings, she's not happy in this relationship, what action can I take to set a boundary to get out of it?
Yeah.
Right.
And it may suck.
Yeah. And it may suck. It may be really hard. You may have to let a lot of things in your life go to get out of that relationship. Yeah. And, I work with people on that all the time. And sometimes they'll come to me and I'll immediately see that this is not the relationship for them. And I can't say anything. Yeah. Because they're on a journey. Right. And so all I'm to do in that moment, when I see clearly, like this person is really damaging this person, is to empower the person in front of me. Yeah. Right. And help them work through their anger and help them work through their pain or whatever's showing up for them, so that one day they can wake up and be like, I don't need this anymore. It's actually not creating safety for me. And that may take 3 weeks or 3 years or 3 decades. And I may or may not be the person to help get them there. I may just be a part of their path.
To me, that's what the definition of a healer is. I'm not here to give you the answers. No. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Your answers are yours. And it's actually a very personal thing. It's a very intimate thing to have the relationship between you and your path and your solutions. And that can be really seductive because clients are very emotional, right? And as an empath, being able to create those boundaries and understanding this is not my role. I'm not here to put you back together, as convincing as you may be that you've hired me to do that.
Yeah, I'm not here to fix you.
I'm not here to fix you. Yeah. And as an empath, that's something that I get to constantly remind myself of is that's not mine. That's my, and really that's not what you want anyway. You don't want me to do that. No. One, that creates dependency because now you're always coming to me to fix your problems. But two, I don't want to deprive you of that joy and that gift because that really belongs to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, it took me a long time to learn that, Ashley. Yeah. And, there's a lot of wounded healers, and I was one of them in the beginning, not even knowing it, because I thought, well, this is my role, right? And so redefining that role for healers is a big part of my work when I'm doing my training of like, I don't even teach them how to do any healing work on anybody for like at least 8 months.
Great.
Because they got to get their house in order. It took me like 2 years of dedicated work to get my house kind of in order to be able to start to heal.
Relatable. Yeah.
And I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And people try to put me on a pedestal all the time. And even when somebody comes to session with me in person, when I move them to the healing chair, they sit on a chair higher than me because I literally don't want to be anybody's guru or fixer or anything like that.
I noticed that. And I did have a session with her, and I want to talk about that too, because that was fun. And I noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt the energetic difference. I'm like, I know she's doing that for a reason. Be in my experience and not look into that yet. Yeah. But I could feel that there was a reason for that.
Yeah. Because all I'm there to do is to facilitate a connection to something that they don't think that they can connect to. It's not that they can't. It's just that there's a lot of baggage in the way. I talk about they as my guides. There's a wide variety of them, everything from Jesus to Mother Mary to star beings. Like there's a lot of them. And my higher self and the client's higher self and the client's ancestors. There's like a lot of people in that room when I'm doing this work.
Yeah.
And I'm not even always conscious of all of the energy that's coming in and who and what it aligns with, right? I just do it by feeling and knowing and trust. But I'm just there to help move the muck out of the way so that they can be channels of their own divine expression.
Beautiful.
Right? Everybody is a channel. There's nothing special about me. I work really hard to be a clear channel, but there's nothing special about me.
Well said.
So if you come in, my goal is to open that channel for you so that whatever you came here to do and be and want, you can experience. Because why else are we here?
Yeah, right. Right.
It's hard enough to be here, right? This is a hard experiment to be a part of.
It is.
We designed it well.
Yeah.
It's real complicated.
And it's no wonder that when people are in the spiritual realm, they'll say, no, I don't want to come back right now. I need a rest for a little bit.
Yeah, being embodied is a whole other thing. It's
a trauma in and of itself.
It is. And it's something that, as you know, personally, I've had to work on a lot of, like, everybody that ever has worked with me is like, Katie, you're really open at the top and you're not as open at the bottom, right? And so that connection with the earth and being grounded is so important when doing this work, because you can bring all this wonderful information in, but it'll spin you like a top.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so cultivating and embodying, right? I really try to be very authentic in doing my best to embody whatever I'm teaching. And sometimes that really sucks. I'm about to teach a course next week on working with the ascended masters like Yeshua and Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene and Buddha and all these different great beings, right? I've had to move through some big shit to get ready for that, because there was this belief in myself that, oh, well, they're above me, even though I know that they're me and I'm them. On a conceptual level, I've had to move through a lot of unworthiness to be ready to teach that.
Totally get that.
And so that's how my process worked. I've tried to change it, but that's the way it works.
It's the way it is. It's the way it is. So yeah, I do want to talk about my session a little bit. And it's also my way of being able to give her a live testimonial, because she's amazing at what she does. And I think it's really important to give these kinds of testimonials, because there are a lot of folks out there that call themselves healers. Yeah, I see that. I'm going to plug my battery here in just a second. Sorry, guys. But I think, and me for one, I can only speak for myself, that I get really skeptical. Yeah. Really skeptical. And there are folks out there that have impure intentions. Sure. Yeah. And just want to take your money. Yeah. Right. And prey on the vulnerable, and especially those who are in grief or loss and so forth. So the testimony that I want to give is that she's very thorough. She's extremely thorough.
Yeah. There's a lot of nooks and crannies to get into.
Yeah. And just so appreciative of that. And maybe that's the clinician in me that just really enjoys that. Yeah. But I think more than anything, even on a feeling level, I felt like she cared. She was there, and she asked the hard questions, and it did kind of feel like a therapy session in parts, but it was a good thing, because there's information that needs to be gathered. I'm gathering to be able to create the whole picture. Sure. Yeah. And I just so appreciated that, because it made me feel very, very seen and very heard, and that she cared. She cared about my story, about my energy, and the work that was happening. And feel free to give as much feedback or to be as open as you want to about my session.
Yeah. You know, everybody's different when they come into session with me, and it's always slightly different how it comes and manifests. And, you know, a lot of what I worked on with Ashley was about her balance of her masculine and feminine and what she's able to have. And, you know, emotions and being able to feel all of that. And that's pretty typical when somebody comes to me for the first time. I either have one end of the spectrum or the other. Oftentimes, like, I'll have the deeply feeling empath that totally knows that they're that, or I will have the empath that is that and has no idea and has really turned all of that energy off and shut that down for a period of time, which means that there's a block in their body, or there's something that is stuck in their life that they're not able to move forward in. And so, you know, it's important, I think, to realize that I'll give you an idea of like what we're going to do, but it will be completely different for every person, because I try to tailor it to whatever is most needed for that particular person at the time. And, you know, I don't know about your experience, but, you know, there may have been some things that like were in your subconscious that we had to bring to the surface. And there may have been a way of me talking about it in a different way, something that you already knew about yourself, but the way that we expanded on it might have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. I was so appreciating that resistance was coming up because that is so in me, and whenever I'm having that experience, if I'm going into a healing session or even therapy and just something that is depth oriented, that's the shit that comes up. That's the Ashley stuff.
Resistance. Yep.
It's there. And it even comes through in anger.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like is anger. Yeah. And there's a part of me that's, is projecting like, how dare she go there? How dare she want to push me?
Don't worry, I'm used to that.
Right. But also the other side of my brain knows, this isn't her. This is misattributed, and that it's me.
Yeah.
It's me. It's my stuff that's there. And I also go into or I guess during that session, I was going into, well, I've got so much going on right now. Of course, when I leave here today, I've got to do. And I can so easily blame it on that. I'm so saturated right now.
Likes to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And sort of like what you were talking about earlier, that getting into a space of being able to observe that is such a gift. It's such a gift because I can feel myself kind of flirting with that line of giving into it and then coming back, giving into it and coming back, for sure. And it's just a reminder that it's sort of like a tap on the shoulder that, hey, Ash, that stuff is still there. Here's another opportunity. You want to do something with it, you can. Just know that there's going to be another opportunity if you don't heed the call right now.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful way to look at it. I mean, I'm a Taurus, which means that I'm super stubborn and I don't like change, and I'm changing constantly. It's like this huge universal joke. And that resistance that you are talking about has been really prevalent this month, because the way my guides work with me is at the beginning of the month on my YouTube channel, I give a energy update of like the main themes that we're working through as a collective. And if you resonate with my work, you'll probably resonate with those themes. People will email me and be like, how did you get in my brain? Right. And those themes come in, and then I have a healing circle every month that I teach about that particular theme to help people navigate one of them. Right. Yeah. And then in session though, because I see so many people, I might see 17 or 20 people a week. And that's a lot for energy work. Yeah. And so my guides have worked with me in a way where they kind of bring everybody in on waves. So there will be a particular theme for the week and for the month. And so everybody kind of comes in on the day that they need to come in, even if they reschedule. It's trippy how it works. And so the day that you came in and the month that you came in for your session, it's all about resistance this month. Right? So however we decided to schedule that when we did, because I know it was a while ago, because it takes a bit to get on my calendar, like the universe timed all of that perfectly so that not only would I be in a space to deliver what you needed and bring that through because of the work I'm doing and what's happening in the collective, but you would be ready to receive that in the way that you needed it in that moment. Yeah. And so if somebody reschedules, within reason, unless they're in just resistance to showing up, which sometimes happens, I'm always like, oh, interesting. I wonder why that needed to move and this person needed to move in. And it always works out so beautifully. Yeah. But and that's me letting go of control and trusting my busy, crazy ass schedule that the universe is working it out. But that doesn't mean that I don't go into resistance.
Of course. Yeah.
And sometimes when that resistance comes up, it's because I'm fighting against the universe, right? They're wanting me to do this thing and not that thing. And I'm like, no, I kind of like this thing. Yeah. Right. And so we're working on that resistance right now as a collective in a huge way, because we are shifting. We are changing. There are new frequencies coming in. We're expanding. Everything that I'm doing with the community these days is very much expanding, and people want to be connected to one another again. But for the last 2 years, we haven't been. And I'm noticing people that never had anxiety before are coming with anxiety or depression or whatever. It's probably been in there. Now they just can't pretend like it's not there, because they have to go back out and engage with the world. And they're like, oh my God, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of people that are sort of like what you were saying earlier. During these 2 years, it's kind of been this incubation cocoon period, and coming out of it and realizing, hey, this isn't the life that I want to live,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
especially for those that are in a very pivotal or transitory time, like graduating from college or
Ooh,
switching
yeah.
careers or having a child.
Mhm.
They're really feeling it
Yeah.
because they're standing at the precipice of something being so completely
On
different.
top of the world changing.
Yes, on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I've got all this new knowledge of, oh my God, life can be so different. I was going down this path and now I have choice to go down this path. What do I do?
Yeah.
Because I still have all these outside influences saying, come back,
Come back.
come back here.
Stay here.
Yeah. That is what I think the anxiety and depression is about right now for a
Yeah.
lot of folks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that, it's been very clear to me, every energy update I do, every channeling, every workshop, every meditation I drop into, they're like, Katie, the change is going to keep happening faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. It is speeding up. Time is shifting on our planet too, right? Which I think it's so funny that we might actually get rid of daylight savings time finally. Because I'm like, what man decided that we were going to make a construct out of time, and like compartmentalize it and control it in that way. But I digress. But time is speeding up in a lot of ways because we're packing a lot more energetic shift into every moment of the day. So you're not crazy if you think that, if you're like, oh my God, what is happening?
Mhm.
And the amount of growth that I've been on this path for a long time, probably since I was born, honestly, in some capacity. And the amount of growth that I've been through in the last 2 years is crazy.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's for somebody who's doing this work every day. And I know that everybody's feeling that. And this level of change that we're being asked to make, we're not at the place where we're doing the easy things right now.
No kidding.
As I talk with my guides, this process that we're in, around 2032 is when I believe we will have made a huge shift in consciousness to more of that new way of being that I was talking about, where things are more in balance. So that's still 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Right. Now, could we do it faster? Could we do it slower? There's so many different variables, right? So when I look at timelines, it's just which one feels the most right.
Mhm.
And but this year in particular is so much about coming back into community, but in a way that we haven't done before. So I always say within community is unity, right? So we have to be unified individually and in our uniqueness and in our wholeness if we're going to show up in community in a unified way. Because if you show up and you don't know who you are and you don't know where your traumas are and you don't know yourself and you try to come into community, it's going to be really rocky. But if you've done that inner work, like we've been working on for the last 2 years, and then you come into community, magic fucking happens, right? That's when new systems get created, new education systems, new government systems, new financial systems, new paradigms in the corporate America space. All of these things that are coming that I think we can kind of feel are going to come from this new community and unity balance that we're coming into. Right. And so when the founders and I of the Soul Expo created it, it was this idea of let's bring all of those pieces together and let's give people an idea of what's changing and let people see some of the thought leaders and get excited.
Yeah.
So we've been in so much fear for the last 2 years.
Yes. So let's talk about that.
Yeah,
the Soul Expo, and also anything else that you want to mention
Sure.
that could benefit our listeners.
Yeah. So the Soul Expo, for those of you that are local to Charlotte, and we will have an opportunity for you to purchase the recordings of the workshops that we have here too.
Great.
So you can go to thesoulexpo.com and sign up for our newsletter and find out all about it. But it's happening here in Charlotte on April 30th. And we have over 12 workshops, including a shaman coming all the way from Peru, which I'm super excited about, on all kinds of different topics about, let's say the education system and conscious parenting, being a spiritual entrepreneur. So we have 6 people on that panel. We have an alternative medicine panel where somebody's building an alternative hospital and all kinds of really exciting things. And then we have other speakers that are going to be talking about what they do, emotional freedom technique, quantum spirituality, all these different topics, right? And so there's 12 plus workshops. And then we have over 45 conscious business owners who are bringing their stuff and their products and their services, and setting up in this beautiful ballroom that we've rented at the Harris Conference Center near the airport. And then we have 36 readers and healers that are all different modalities. And if you purchase your ticket ahead of time, then you can come and you can pre-book a healing session, so you get exactly what you need at the time that you want. It doesn't overlap with another workshop that you want to go to. For all you planners out there, it's a lot of extra work for us to do this, but that's one of the reasons why we're doing it that way. And so it's $35 if you get your ticket in advance and $45 at the door. And you can come and join us for the day and kind of be in this community and this experience. And we have some amazing people coming. And I'm just really excited. In the middle of the day, the founders, which is Holly Whitman, my husband Josh, and myself, will be doing a New Earth healing ceremony. And there'll be space in the ballroom for about 200 people to join us for that. And I don't know what's going to happen, but every time I think about it, I start crying.
Aww.
So I know it's important, and it's really to anchor some of the things that I was talking about today, and to like reset. We need a reset after everything that's happened in the last 2 years. Everybody that comes to me is so lonely.
Yeah.
And lacking community. And so that's really, this has been a true labor of love. It has not been easy. I've had to up level a lot to put this together and put myself out in this way. And I know Holly and Josh have too. And so we're really excited about that. I do have a retreat called New Earth Now that's happening in July. It's on my website on zenwithinacademy.com. And that will be focused on empowerment, really stepping into some of the things I talked about today, that place of balance, but really truly connecting with and believing in oneself so that they can go out and create these changes in community, right? So that's why it's called New Earth Now, like as an individual.
Okay.
And that's July 21st through 24th. And then I have my programs that I was talking about where I teach you how to be an empath and a healer. Those are open all the time, and I have groups coming in constantly. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it all on your own and just receive the teachings, which are all recorded and available online. It's called my Level 1 Awakening Program. Or you can join us in a more guided way where you get healing sessions with me and you come to a group call and we do special channel things every month. And so that's all on my website. And then of course I offer healing sessions.
And what is your website?
zenwithinacademy.com.
Okay.
And I have a YouTube channel. So if you just want to kind of get to know me more, that's a great opportunity to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I post energy updates, and I talk about a lot of the things that I'm seeing with clients and just help people know what's happening. And so I'll post lots of videos. And then finally, I have a monthly online healing circle, and it's really low cost. It's like $30 to join us. And if you subscribe, you get access to 2 years of archives of healings on everything from inner child work to being in your power to loving yourself. Like I go through a different topic every month. And so if you want to dive into this work in a way that's kind of inexpensive and like you just want to get started, that's a beautiful way. And we have 60 plus people joining us every month. And so it's a really beautiful container.
That's great.
And it's always focused on what we're doing in the month, right? So a particular energy theme comes in. And my goal is like, this is kind of like a little entry level academy program. So you're always up leveling every month and getting the support that you need and in community. And so that's a really easy way to join us, and you can drop in and subscribe. And then if you're done, right? Like there's no attachment on my part. I just want people to have what they need.
That's beautiful.
So those are a few things, but zenwithinacademy.com has all of that goodness, including a link to the soulexpo.com website as well.
Great. Thank you. And we will have that in the show notes as well for this episode. So last question.
Yeah.
How do you nourish yourself?
Ooh, I love that you asked that question right now, especially. So I've been working a lot on the toxic masculine energy that I've taken into my body over the years of feeling like I have to be doing more. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm a perfectionist. And so lately, how I've been nourishing myself is having a conversation with my inner feminine. First of all, I've had to apologize to her a hell of a lot and say, look, I know that I am not doing a super good job of managing my time right now. And I've got all these people, and here's what I'm going to do about it. And then I follow through. Right. And so it's like,
those are separate steps. All of those are separate steps.
Right. And it's kind of like being in a good marriage and a good partnership, right? You want to do that internally first. So like my masculine might want me to get all these tasks done that are really important, that are all these things. I'm doing a lot. But my feminine also needs to feel her feelings and be supported. And she needs a long hot bath at night and Epsom salts and Dead Sea salts. And she needs an infrared sauna appointment and a massage and all those self-care things. But she also just needs time to just be.
Yeah.
Right. Without any expectation of anything or any doing at all.
Yeah.
And so lately it's looked like having those conversations internally. And I'm definitely talking to myself and recommitting every day to this beautiful, nurturing part of me that is my essence. You know, I have a lot of parts to my personality, but when I'm working with somebody, tapping into that mother frequency, even though I don't have children, don't want to have children in this lifetime, being able to tap into that is wonderful. And I send a lot of that energy out, but I have to remember to send that energy back in.
Yes, girl.
And self-care is different. Some days it's meditation and playing with crystals because I love that. Other days it's taking my dogs for a walk. Other days it's a hike. Sometimes it's a hot bath. And sometimes it's just a really good meal with a friend that I love. Yeah. Right. It doesn't have to be anything major, but bringing the awareness that I'm supporting my feminine in that for me is huge. Just so that she knows that she's seen. Because, if you're in a relationship like me and you want that part of you to be seen in that relationship. Sure. Right. And it's the same thing internally as well.
Yeah. So. Love the way that you explain that. That's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So that's a wrap. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was fun. I learned a lot. Always do. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in.
We appreciate you.
Yeah. And we will catch you on the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Blue Sage Holistic Healing. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.